Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Wales and welcome to Newport. It would be remiss of me if I didn't speak to you in another language as well to say the same things. So, croeso mawr I chi gyd i'r cyfarfod genedlaethol UKIP yng Nghymru yn y cas newydd prifddinas a'r hen dairnas Celtaidd o Gwent, which is, of course, welcome to Wales, welcome to Newport, the capital of the ancient Celtic kingdom of Gwent, because Welsh as a language was spoken in these islands long before English came into existence, and indeed before the Romans came to Britain and put us into the very first Roman Empire. Well, we saw that one off, didn't we? In the year 410 AD, and I hope we are going to see the Second Roman Empire off in 2019 AD. We should have left on the 29th of March, then we should have left at the end of July. Now we are supposed to be leaving on the 31st of October. I'll believe it when I see it. Although Boris is talking a good game, and we must give him every encouragement to deliver on the deal which he has promised to the British people. We, the British people, are the sovereign legislature of this country, not the time servers in the House of Commons. They claim to have a right to override the will of the people, but they are representatives of the people. They are put where they are to do what we tell them to do. Now, I've been around in politics for a very, very, very long time. I indeed started out my political career, my parliamentary political career, just up the road, indeed, from Newport. I was born in the ancient county of Monmouthshire, just 12 miles from Newport. And indeed, my grandmother went to work at the age of 12 in 1900 in the old Westgate Hotel here in the city of Newport itself. So I have long memories of the city of Newport and the old county of Monmouthshire. In fact, my very first parliamentary contest was in Abertillery, which is, again, very short distance from here. It was at that time Labour's strongest seat in the country. In the 1970 general election, I think they got something like 85% of the vote, which is the sort of level you expected in North Korea or Albania. And indeed, living under a Labour government in Wales for such a long time, it often feels like Albania or North Korea at the moment. But I fought a vigorous campaign over many, many months, and I managed to turn the 10%, which my predecessor as Conservative candidate got, into a resounding 6%. But then it was the miners' strike and the three-day week, and Abertillery had more pits in it then than I think any other constituency in the country. But the world has changed out of all recognition since that time. But one thing, of course, remains the same. We were in the EU then. We joined the previous year. I had been opposed to going in the first place. I spoke against it at the Conservative Party conference as long ago as 1971. I campaigned to come out in the referendum in 1975. But when we didn't win in that referendum in 1975, I didn't throw my toys out of the pram, dispute the result, and seek immediately to overturn it and prevent what the British people then voted for from happening. And what a contrast the Leavers then and now are to the Remainiacs, who will simply not accept the will of the people, and all they set out to do is to defy the will of the people and to undermine what they voted for. Well, they're not going to succeed. However long it takes, we will get out of the EU, and I hope now it's going to be less long than it seemed a short time ago. Well, that will pose the question, what is the purpose of UKIP after Brexit? And that's why this conference is an opportunity for us to be positive. It's very easy to concentrate on negatives in politics, where political people are by nature disputatious and what to the outside world appear to be small differences of opinion, sometimes incomprehensible differences of opinion, loom larger than they need to do. Well, UKIP has a very clear purpose post-devolution, because we are the United Kingdom Independence Party, and we live here in Wales, in one of the four nations of the United Kingdom, And as a proud Welshman, born and bred, I feel that there isn't any necessary contradiction between being British on the one hand and Welsh on the other. The two seem to me to fit together quite naturally. The United Kingdom isn't an abstract construct like the EU, some product of the fevered imagination of some abstract technocrat. We are a real nation, and a nation is a nation when it feels itself to be a nation. And yes, Wales does feel itself to be a nation, but it also feels itself overwhelmingly to be British. You know, I saw a poll just a couple of months ago of how many Welsh people would actually like to break up the United Kingdom and to take Wales out of the UK. And the answer to that was 6%. So 94% of the people of Wales feel similarly. There is no difference between being in the United Kingdom and being a proud supporter of Wales as a nation as well. But devolution, as it has developed, we've had a Welsh Assembly now for 20 years, has actually sought to undermine that union itself. And we see this in Scotland, perhaps even more than we do in Wales, where the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish National Party are tearing the guts out of Scotland politically, and the other parties, instead of standing up to that and confronting it, have been saying, oh yes, me too, we'll have a bit of that too. Even the Tories, who are supposed to be the national party, Disraeli said the Tories are a national party or we're nothing, have gone along with the devolution line to the detriment of the United Kingdom itself. And that is true of Wales as much as it is of Scotland. The truth of the matter is that devolution in Wales has failed at every level. In 20 years, of course, we've only had a Labour government in Wales, sometimes propped up by the little helpers in Plaid Cymru, and now by the sole Liberal Democrat in the Welsh Assembly. If ever there was a case for the Trade Descriptions Act, it's the title of the party as the Liberal Democrats, as they are now quite... They are now quite explicitly anti-democratic because Joe Swinson, the current leader of the Liberal Party, has said that regardless of the will of the British people, the Liberals are determined to put us back into the chains of the EU. They aren't interested in democracy, and they certainly aren't interested in the opinions of the British people. Well, let's hope that the British people take their revenge upon them in the next general election, whenever that comes. But the truth of the matter is that we live in a one-party state in Wales, because although we've had a Labour government, they have been propped up by two of the other parties in the Welsh Assembly. Plaid Cymru at one time were in coalition with them, and Plaid Cymru will always support the Labour Party in a motion of confidence, as they have done, indeed, in the last few years. And Kirsty Williams, who's the sole Liberal Democrat representative currently, was elected for the constituency of Brecon and Radnor in May 2016. And that's a constituency in which 92% of the electors voted against the Labour Party. Labour got only 8% in 2016. The very first thing that Kirsty Williams did upon election was to join the Labour government. So that's what the Liberals think about the people of this country, that the people are purely a convenience to put them into Parliament or into office, and then they can do exactly as they like, even though it might be the opposite of what the people want. Well, UKIP is a grassroots party that operates on totally different bases. We have grown out of the people. We're a spontaneous movement. Maybe that's why we're such a fractious lot. Maybe that's why we spend such a lot of time navel-gazing and having rows with one another. And that's not always a bad thing. But you can have rather too much of it, as Kirsten very properly pointed out a moment ago. But the Welsh Assembly, to go back to this, doesn't represent the Welsh people at all. You know, Wales voted to come out of the European Union in 2016 in the referendum. We voted by nearly 53% to leave, much the same as in England. But when you look at the Assembly members in Cardiff, 49 of them out of 60 are Remainers. 49. And yet more than half the people of Wales voted for the opposite of what they want. And when you look at where the Leave vote is concentrated, it's all the seats like Abertillery, where I still carry the scars of that contest 40-odd years ago, which at one time were Labour's strongest seats. Places like Ebbw Vale and Merthyr Tydfil. Ebbw Vale voted 62% to leave the EU. And yet their Assembly member, Alun Davies, as one of the loudest supporters of a second referendum campaign and for the policy of keeping Wales inside the European Union. And yet, when you think of the damage which has been done to ordinary working people in the last 50 years by Britain's membership of the EU, what on earth is the Labour Party doing supporting a gang of international technocrats who live in the first-class carriages of the Brussels gravy train, living it up at our expense? The Labour Party today no longer represents ordinary working-class people in this country, least of all white working-class people, because they are now in thrall to identity politics and a migrant vote base, which means that the more immigration that they encourage, the greater the vote that they are likely to get. That's the theory upon which the Labour Party's immigration policy has been explicitly based in the past. I remember when Tony Blair was Prime Minister, there was a chap called Andrew Nether who was their advisor on immigration and on cultural identity, and he said that it was the job of the Labour government to rub the noses of the people in mass immigration, and so that would make the arguments of the right, it would make them irrelevant and cement Labour rule forever and a day. Now that's what UKIP is standing against, because we are the party of the people, and we know that the British people are very worried about what's happening to this country because of mass immigration. We're adding to the population of the United Kingdom a number equivalent to the size of the population of the city of Cardiff every single year. Year in and year out, we're adding at least 1/3 people to our population just through migration alone. We are now the most densely populated country in the whole of Europe, even more so than Holland. And even though you've got huge expanses of nothingness in Scotland, indeed my own region of Mid and West Wales, I represent all the empty bits. I've got 0.5% of the UK's human population and 20% of its sheep. I might do better if the sheep had votes as well as the people, but even taking into account those empty bits, in the urban areas and urbanized areas, the population density is now reaching crisis proportions. And it's no wonder, is it, that housing is unaffordable for an increasing number of people in this country when the population keeps on jumping by leaps and bounds in this way. But these are of no concern to politicians in the Labour Party or Plaid Cymru. You know, here we've got a nationalist party, so-called, that doesn't actually believe in the nation at all, because they are fanatical, head-banging supporters of Britain's membership of the EU. They should want government to be based here in Cardiff. And of course, if we leave the EU, a whole raft of policy responsibility will come from Brussels down to Cardiff. It will bypass Westminster. Environment, transport, a whole range of things will be in the hands of the Welsh government rather than the European government based in Brussels. But Plaid Cymru doesn't want that. They think that actually Wales is not governed from far enough away. You know, they want to give more powers to the EU. They would prefer to be governed by a collection of international technocrats who are not elected and whom we can't even name, let alone dismiss, in Brussels, than elected politicians based in Westminster or Cardiff, who at least you can boot out if you don't like what they do. You know, the EU is about to start a new chapter under a new commission, new set of commissioners in Brussels. The president of the Commission is going to change from the rather jolly, if sinister, Jean-Claude Juncker, to Ursula von der Leyen. Now, I can well understand why the Germans would have wanted to get rid of her to Brussels, because she was, by common consent, the weakest member of the federal German government. But who elected her? How did she end up as our president, the president of the European Union? It was a decision taken in dark, possibly no longer smoke-filled rooms, but no doubt the fetid atmosphere had the same effect as an excess of smoke upon their decision-making. And we ended up with Ursula von der Leyen. Who are the other commissioners in the EU? Can anybody name a single one of them? And yet these are the people who have more power than any cabinet minister at Westminster in the policy areas for which the EU is responsible. And Plaid Cymru means the party of Wales. They should be the party that stands against this, that stands for democracy and stands for the taking of decisions about the laws which we have to obey and observe at the most local level of the nation, which for them is Wales. And yet they don't believe in that. They're not a nationalist party at all. They're a regional separatist party. That's all that they stand for. And if Wales were to become independent and were to take its place in the EU as an independent nation, what power would Wales have? You know, we are roughly the same size as Lithuania, and in population terms. So that means that Wales would have 13 MEPs and would have 2% of the votes in the Council of Ministers. That's no power whatsoever. What matters in politics and what matters for democracy is that we, the people, actually decide ultimately, if not on the decisions which are taken, on the people who are taking those decisions. So if we don't like the decisions that they take, we can boot them out. And UKIP is the only party that unambiguously believes this and has believed it right from the very start, because that's why UKIP was founded. But there is more to life than Brexit, and that's why we must plan for the future. We have assembly elections in Wales in 18 months' time, and in spite of recent polls, we have a very good chance of getting elected. On 8% of the vote, any party is likely to get 5 members of the Assembly. And we got 7 elected in 2016 on 10 or 11% of the vote. You know, this is not an impossible bar for us to jump by any means. Proportional representation does change fundamentally the electoral dynamics of the political system. And Wales is the part of the country where UKIP has the best chance of success. That is why Wales, I think, should be UKIP's priority, at least for the 18 months in the build-up to those elections. I stood as the UKIP candidate in the Westminster parliamentary constituency by-election in Newport West just a few months ago, and I quadrupled the vote from roughly 2% to over 8%, and that was, I think, the harbinger of what we could achieve. Since then, the Brexit Party has come onto the scene, but and actually has walked away with our clothes. And I'm afraid to say that the Tommy Robinson issue has given Nigel the excuse that he always wanted to set up his own narcissistic personality cult vehicle, which is all that the Brexit Party actually is. Because strangely, for a political party, you can't actually join it. All you can do is send Nigel money for the privilege of getting emails from him every so often. It's a great business model, isn't it? And he's not so much the leader of the Brexit Party as the owner. And that's very, very different from a democratic political party like UKIP, where the owners of the party are the members. The power in UKIP is in your hands. You elect the National Executive Committee of UKIP. You elect the leader of UKIP. It's up to you to decide what sort of party this is going to be in the future. And for me, it has to be a broad-based party along the lines that we always have been, devoted to national independence, to civil liberties, to the basic freedoms which we came to take for granted in Britain, which were now under threat from various politically correct sources. And we stand for a free economy and for the rights of people to live their lives as they want, so long as they pose no threat or danger to anybody else. What does the Brexit Party stand for apart from Brexit? The answer is that we don't know, because Nigel has refused to tell us if the Brexit Party does stand for anything else. And there's only one reason why he, cleverly and intelligently perhaps, has failed to bring about any extra policies, is that once you start having policies, then there's a possibility for some people to disagree with them. And then perhaps you get into the same position that we are in UKIP, that disputatious types start shouting at the odds. And Nigel certainly doesn't want that, because the one thing that I certainly have reason to know this from personal experience, the one thing that Nigel will never brook is disagreement with him. And then you start getting into trouble. He's a great guy. Let's not underestimate his achievement in putting UKIP where it was before the referendum campaign, and the role that UKIP played in the referendum, getting it in the first place and winning it. And Nigel Farage is a phenomenon. But he does have certain weaknesses of character which limit the capacity of success. And beyond Brexit, I don't think that the Brexit Party has much traction at all because they don't know what they stand for, whereas we do. And when we fight the election in Wales in 18 months' time, we'll be fighting on a whole range of issues, not least uncontrolled immigration on the one hand, but also on issues like climate change. You know, we've had all these protests going on over the last week, and we have St. Greta Thunberg over the headlines in the media every day or so. Wales is a very poor country. And I said earlier on that devolution has failed. The average income in Wales is just 3/4 of the average income in the UK. We are the poorest part of the United Kingdom. We've gone backwards in the last 20 years. As I said earlier, Northern Ireland was at the bottom of the table in 1999. Today, Wales is at the bottom of the table. And 1/4 of the people who live in Wales live in fuel poverty. More than 10% of their income is spent on keeping warm and keeping the lights on. We have a lot of poor people in Wales, and yet these climate change fanatics want to push up the price of electricity artificially. You look at your electricity bill, you'll find that 20-25% of it now is taxes and charges and climate change levies. That's a real burden on the shoulders of ordinary people who are finding it difficult even to get by as it is, without having their lives made more difficult by people like Emma Thompson, who flies around the world first class, and people like Elton John. In their private jets, who fly around the world to complain about the rest of us spending too much money, keeping warm, and using our cars. You know, this is hypocrisy of the grossest kind, but it is actually a declaration of war on the interests and rights of ordinary working people. And who's standing up for them? The Conservative Party isn't standing up for them. The Labour Party, Plaid Cymru, and the Liberals are leading the charge in the opposite direction. So UKIP is going to stand up for ordinary people on climate change in the next election. And there is no evidence... There is no evidence that things are different today from where they were 800 years ago in the medieval warm period, or 2,000 years ago in the Roman period, when we were growing grapes all over the country and the wine industry in Britain started for the first time. And if you look at the temperature data with all its imperfections that has been collected in the last 300 years, then you will see that the climate has oscillated. It's sometimes been warm, sometimes it's been cold. In the days of Samuel Pepys and his diaries, he was writing about people having frost fairs, roasting chestnuts in braziers on the frozen Thames. That was a cold period. But before it, there was a medieval warm period when we were sweltering, as we have been for the last week. And what's wrong with sweltering in a bit of heat anyway? Do you know, one of the things that we never get told is, as a result of what global warming there has been, the argument is about what causes it, not whether the Earth has been warming. As a result of the global warming which has occurred in recent years, then the Earth today is far more green than it has been in recent decades. We can grow crops over more of the planet than we used to be able to. In a world where still hundreds of millions of people go to bed hungry every night, isn't that a good thing? Shouldn't we be celebrating it? There's no evidence that there's no evidence that temperature change is out of control. In the last 150 years, the average temperature of the Earth has warmed by 0.8 of a degree, less than 1 degree centigrade. And from the Armageddon predictions that we have from the Greta Thunbergs of the world, you'd think we were all going to be incinerated by the sun by the end of the century. This is absolutely not going to happen. There's a lack of sense of proportion here because government, of course, has got involved in it. There's a whole industry now of people who are sucking on the taxpayers' teats for the huge amount of money which is shoveled in their direction from your pockets and the pockets of those ordinary people that I was talking about a moment ago who can hardly pay the charges to keep warm in a cold winter, into the pockets of developers and lobbyists and a whole range of sock puppet charities that aren't charities at all, but merely engines of political propaganda. And we, the mugs, are paying for it. Well, UKIP is going to campaign against this. We're going to campaign for the integrity of the United Kingdom. We're going to campaign for the interests of working people. We're going to campaign and continue to campaign for the continued independence of the United Kingdom. And we are a sovereign, independent nation in the world, taking decisions for ourselves, governed by the people. The people in Parliament are elected by the people, and they should do what we say. So when people ask, what is the purpose of UKIP in the future, we'll say, it says on the label what it does in the tin. You know, we are the United Kingdom Independence Party, and we are the party of the people. That says it all, in my view, and that means not only do we have a continued reason to exist, but we have a permanent and perpetual reason to exist. So let's stop navel-gazing, let's stop arguing amongst ourselves about peripheral issues and concentrate on the things that really matter to ordinary people in their daily lives, and in particular, what matters in their pockets, what they can afford to pay for the basic necessities of life. So let's get on with recreating UKIP and getting us back to where we were a very, very short time ago. We have not long before the London elections next year. David Curtin perhaps will talk about that later in the conference. We have the Welsh elections in 18 months' time. My colleague Gareth Bennett is going to address you next on that. I'd like to thank you personally as well for sticking with the party and being here today. It certainly isn't an act of leadership not to attend your own national conference, I have to say. But we'll pass over that for the time being. I had high hopes of Richard Brain, and indeed I still do have high hopes of Richard Brain. He is a gifted communicator, but he has to use the right words. And I can help him with that. But not only does he have to listen, but he has to ingest as well and digest, and then also to change the things he talks about to the things that matter to ordinary people. We are not a debating society. We are a political party. We exist for one reason only, and that is to win elections so that we can then translate our party policy and programme into legislative action. That is what politics is about. We are not a religious cult. We are not a debating society. We are a political party. Take that message back to your branches, and let's get moving to win the elections to come. Thank you.